Hi DIYers, this is Frank at Alarm Grid. We're working here in the Alarm Grid lab on the 2 gig Go Control GC3 panel today. We'll be showing you how to program the 2 gig DW10-345. This is the thin 2 gig door window contact. It's a fully wireless device and it will program into the system as a single zone, just as any wireless sensor will. This is the contact that comes with the kit. So if you buy the GC3 in a kit, it'll come with a few of these, and you can use these for doors and windows. They're nice and thin, and they work very well. Since we are Honeywell dealers as well, generally when you expand out of 2 gig, you can also use Honeywell sensors on this panel. For today, we're just going to use the 2 gig, and we will have some other videos for the Honeywell sensors later. So first what we'll do is we'll open up the box, and inside we'll see 2 parts. So we have our sensor here. There's a tab on the bottom where we can pop this. We can basically pop this open and release the tamper cover from the back plate. You'll see that we use our flathead screwdriver, and we use this to depress this tab here and open up the keypad and open up the sensor. I will admit this is one of the harder sensors to open, so just keep that in mind and be a little bit patient with it. That's another reason why we generally prefer the Honeywell contacts, but these do come with the kit, and they're great sensors as well. Just, don't get frustrated with trying to open them. Take your time with it. You'll see these 2 plastic tabs beneath the batteries. What this does is it says pull and discard before use. So this is designed to keep these batteries from activating and being in use when this is in the box. So we can pull the plastic tabs out from underneath each battery and push those down nice and snug. And we have the 2 batteries inside there for the longer battery life. Now we can snap this shut by latching the top 2 hooks there and then snapping it shut. And then we have our sensor. In the box, in the 2 gig box, we also have we'll have a little magnet here and also a couple of screws. This is if you wanted to screw it in. Today we'll just be mounting it on the door using adhesive tape. But if you needed to screw it in, you can. In this little package, we have a couple of things here. There's a little wire dongle. So this clips onto the board inside of this unit. If you wanted to use this as a wired zone, for today's purposes, we'll just be using this as wireless with the included magnet and the reed switch. So there's also some adhesive tape in here that makes it nice and easy to mount. So for today's purposes, we will open this up and use just the magnet. So we have our sensor, which is the larger part here, and then our magnet. And that's going to sit right next to the reed switch here on the DW10-345 door window contact. So now what we'll show you how to do is program it. So what we can do here is step right into programming. We'll go to system. Actually, there's 2 ways to get into programming for programming zones. So might as well show you this now. Ideally, you want to hit the 2 gig symbol in the top right and then enter the installer code, which is 1561 by default. If you've changed it, you obviously want to use that. The other way to get in is using the system settings key. You still want to use the installer code, which is 1561. Going in that way also accepts the master user code. So if you go in this way and use your master, we have it on default, which is 1111. If you go down to the installer toolbox, it'll still prompt you for the installer code. So no matter what, whether you go in on the top right or the bottom right, you'll still need to enter this installer code, which we have on default is 1561. Go into system config and then panel programming. Oh, excuse me. Well, once you're into the installer toolbox here, panel programming will show you the question-based programming. Traditionally on the Go Control 2, you had to actually go into the first two questions or the first question and program the sensor. On this panel, the GC3, it's a much more simple interface. So we have wireless zones and wired zones here, as well as key fobs and keypads. So for today, we're using a wireless sensor, so we're going to do wireless zones. The first thing we can do here, it's already on wireless zone 1. If you wanted to change it to a different zone number, you can toggle down to that zone. For today, we'll use zone 1. The sensor type is the first thing we can do. So we'll be using this on our front door. So we want to use the front door as an entry and exit point. So we'll set this entry exit 1. That will then allow the system, it'll give you time as a user on the system to enter the home and allow for that entry delay period to expire before the alarm goes off. As well as on the way out, you'll have the exit delay period to leave the home and close the entry point and close the entry exit door before the alarm goes off. So those are set in the question programming, the question-based programming, and we have another video on that, so you can check that out. That's just how to program your entry and exit delays on the GC3. For today, we'll just set it on entry exit 1, and then we can actually move right down to the next selection here, which is equipment code. Now, each piece of equipment here on the 2 gig panels has a specific number as far as the code and the number associated with that particular piece of hardware. You can use this little 3-line horizontal symbol here on the top right, and it'll actually show you not only the codes, but it'll show you which of these we're working with. So this is actually the 2 gig thin door window contact. So we can select that as the equipment code, and you'll see that turns orange, and then we can move down to serial number. Okay, so there's 2 ways to enroll the serial number on any device, any wireless device. One is to manually enter it, which you can use the serial number listed inside the unit. For today's purpose, it's actually listed right here on the back side as well. It says TXID. It says 041-4896. So it'll be 3 numbers dash 4 numbers. To avoid any manual misentries or user error, we can hit the learn function here. We'll actually cancel that. We'll clear this out. Hit the learn function, and it'll say listening. Now is when you can take your sensor and you can move it away and bring it back. And you'll see the panel says sensor received. Your 7-digit serial number that matches the TXID on the back of the unit will pop in here. You can hit accept, and that'll lock that in. Okay. We now can go down to equipment age. Quite frankly, this really doesn't matter. We can put it as new. If it was an existing sensor, you could do that. It doesn't really change anything in programming. We'll keep it as new for now. And then we'll go down to, you'll actually see that the next selection is the sensor loop. Okay, this is really important. If you go into the serial number and you manually enter this serial number that's listed on the back of the sensor, it will not automatically assign the loop. Okay, the loop is a way for a device like this to use to have multiple functions. So for example, this unit, when in use with the magnet and the reed switch, it actually acts as a fully wireless unit that will transmit a fault when this magnet moves away from the contact. If you use the included wired lead that plugs into the inside of this sensor, there's a female clip where this will clip into the board, and then this little 2-wire lead can be spliced into a wired contact, something like a Honeywell or really any wired, normally closed contact. If you wanted the system to be programmed to determine a fault or an open or close based on when this wired contact was open or closed, that's where you'd want to map this to loop 1, okay? If you do that, you can auto-enroll that as well, but what you would do is you would connect this clip to a wired contact and enroll it. And we'll show that in another video. For today, we're using the DW10 as a fully wireless unit. And just so you know, when it's fully wireless, it's using loop 2, not loop 1, okay? It could be a little bit confusing because it's one of the few sensors that uses loop 2. So just keep that in mind. In order to avoid any issues or even having to deal with the loops, you always want to learn in sensors using that function. If you had this in learning mode, and instead of faulting the magnet on the reed switch built into the sensor, you actually open and close the wired contact, that would learn it in as loop 1 because it knows that that's the function that's transmitting the serial number back to the panel. So again, for today, we're using loop 2. If we were to manually put this in when we're just using the magnet, not the wired lead, that's where we would put it manually on loop 2. So you can see that these are already orange. Since we learned it in, loop 2 is automatically learned here as loop 2. We'll keep it on that. We'll go down to transmission delay. So this is an important setting. Transmission delay is a feature that allows the panel, the alarm system, the GC3, to hold an alarm signal before transmitting out to the central station. So if this was on a door where maybe you have false alarms, or you're just maybe in a situation where you want to avoid false alarms because the city police, county sheriff has strict alarm fines, then you can enable this transmission delay. And then there's a transmission delay period that can be set in the question-based programming. We'll have another video on that. I always like disabling this. What that means is when this alarm goes off, when the entry delay period has expired on this contact, so you walk in, if your entry delay period is 30 seconds, you don't get to the keypad in time, or if it is a real intrusion and the alarm goes off, as soon as that siren goes off, when this is disabled, the signal's going right out. If it's enabled, it's going to hold that signal for that transmission delay period. So we'll keep it disabled for now, and then we'll go down to voice descriptor. This is where you can actually put in the name for your zone, okay? It's important to choose from the directory. If you don't, it won't voice enunciate from the panel upon faulting the unit. So if you put this on your front door, then it's not going to enunciate unless you use the actual selection here listed in white. So we'll use front and then hit done. This will automatically use, we'll put in, let's see here, we'll go edit. And so we already have front in there, and now we'll put door and done. We can move down to sensor reports. The sensor reporting feature is a feature that allows this sensor to send the signal out to the central. So similar to transmission delay, where it's going to hold that signal, this is a global setting that will fully disable this sensor from even reporting out to the central station. So if you wanted to set this as a monitor zone on, maybe a liquor cabinet or something that you can manage to get a text every time it's open, but you don't necessarily want an alarm, that's where you can disable this feature. We always recommend enabling it. 99% of the time it will be enabled, so we'll keep that on enabled. Sensor supervised. RF supervision is a way for the system to check in with this device and make sure that it's communicating. So we always want that to be enabled. It'll then check in and make sure that it is enabled there. Sensor chime. If this is on a front door and you want this to chime and enunciate on the panel, then you can set this to any of these settings here. There's a lot of different things. You can set it to different chime tones with voice enunciation or without. For today, since it's on the front door, we'll do ding dong #1 with voice. So we can now save this just by simply hitting next zone, and it'll bump you to the next open zone. We can then go to return to system configuration. You'll see wireless zones is in orange, which means that there's something to save. It'll give you a summary screen of that zone that we just programmed, wireless zone 1 on entry exit. on the 2 gig. The 0862 is the code for this unit. The serial number, the loop number 2, since we're using this wirelessly, not with that wired lead we showed you earlier. And let's go back one more time. And then it'll show you everything else that we did. We'll go ahead and hit save and back out of programming. Once this resets, we should be able to now fault this and show system not ready, front door open. So that's how you program the DW10-345 on your 2 gig GC3. If you have any other questions, you can email us at support@alarmgrid.com, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.